Welcome to Grounding Connection, where we are renaturing in relationship with climate change. This series demonstrates a different way to interact with our fear, anger, hopelessness, and helplessness around climate change, or collapse, or sixth extinction event, however you label it. I'm Betsy Kudlinski. I'm a freedom guide, like a nature guide, but the nature we're exploring is our own. As someone living with trauma, stress, and overwhelm, we work our way toward personal freedom. With our nervous system's interest and safety in mind, I guide us to trust our true nature and feel the freedom to walk our own paths in life. With training in somatic experiencing and life coaching, over 3 decades of working professionally with animals, and more than 20 years of interest in climate change, this project is an attempt at making a human impact. I'm representing only me and my work, which is how I use my knowledge and skills in relationship and community with human and non human animals. I'm not portraying SE or even life coaching here. I fully acknowledge that I wouldn't be here doing this without the knowledgeable people in my social lineage. Also, the radiant humans with whom I couldn't record this series are volunteers, some of whom I've worked with in the past and some I have never met before. Everything beyond the first couple of minutes you'll see and hear is spontaneous. It's how I work, and I won't change it, even for YouTube. I'm deeply grateful both for these humans and for any and all humans who watch these episodes. If this episode is interesting or helpful to you, let me know. We all have to deal with YouTube's algorithms, so comment, like, subscribe, tell a friend. If it means a whole lot, I'd be delighted if you bought me a coffee. The link is in the description. Now, this episode is with Amy, where we start off discussing the plight of the polar bears. I want to let you know right off the bat that this session is intense. I would consider this an actual content warning, with discussion of disturbing images of injured animals, adult language, and we go deeply into strong feelings. As you watch or listen to this, take time for yourself. That could mean turning it off or pausing it at intervals. There's nothing to be gained for pushing past comfort to get this all in one go.
Got it.
Hi, Amy. How you doing in this moment?
I'm well. I'm very well. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very well. I love to hear that. What does very well feel like to you right now?
Oh, it feels so far advanced from the neutral positive.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It feels like there's so much momentum behind like issues we've been talking about and um, new endeavors and the possibility of opportunities that could come to fruition and seeing some of those things happening,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely feels
Yeah.
like, yeah, really good.
Yeah. So I almost hate to bring up the reason that we're here because feeling good is, awesome. And we like to do that at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Um, do you want to tell me a little bit about what we were talking about earlier about your topic issue that kind of strikes to your heart lately?
Yeah, sure. So, speaking to your climate change and like the somatic work as it relates to climate change, which we've never touched in our own sessions, but the thing that really pulls on my heartstrings, and the reason I wanted to do this is because of specifically the polar bears in their natural habitat and watching, seeing images of their habitat changing and in many ways, diminished to the point where their survival is threatened or they're starving or there's images of them in what appears to be just completely unnatural settings now. There's something about those images specifically that really just tighten my chest and make me feel completely helpless and useless.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. That feeling of tightened chest and feeling helpless and useless. Um, can you expand on like any sort of sensations in your body when you're just drawing up these images that you remember?
Um, yeah, it's like cold plunge, ironically, where
Mm.
you just your breath is taken away and
Mhm.
there's, this numb pain
Mm.
and challenging breathing, like literally, such a heavy chest that um, I struggle to take full breaths and
Yeah.
continue to look at images and read a story or watch a show that has to do with the polar bears. What the
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm hearing um, tightness, trouble breathing. Um, did you say numb pain?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
like from ice cold water,
Yeah.
how it hurts, and then there's a numbing that starts to take over, but it's really sharp and painful before you go numb.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like that.
Is
I
that,
often have to look away before I get to the numb because
yeah.
I'm finding it really difficult to continue to sit with the program and listen and
Yeah.
look at the images.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, did you used to be able to just stay with a program or images and just like keep keep watching it, keep reading?
I well, there's definitely a time in my life when I made a conscious decision to keep looking.
Yeah.
So I think prior to 2013, I can't remember specifically. I feel like I always looked. I feel like, I have memories of like helping a stray animal, or I was drawn to be able to participate. But that's different. That's like one lost puppy, or
Right.
that's not, a massive overload of pain and suffering. But in 2013, I was in India and I was specifically uh, I was not able to leave a city that I had planned on only being in for a few days. I was going to be in Varanasi, a very auspicious city, for about 3 days, and I couldn't get a bus out of Varanasi. And so I ended up being somewhat stuck.
Mm.
And I was surrounded by primarily paralyzed dogs because there are so many dogs that got hit by tuk-tuks and
Wow.
cars, and so I found that um, that I just couldn't look away, and
Yeah.
that I was asking shopkeepers and locals about who do I call, and I ultimately found one single woman in that city who runs a very small, meager rescue, and use that term loosely. But I ended up like hounding her until I was at her home, and I told her, clearly you need help, which she and her husband very lovingly opened up their home to me and let me live with them for about 3 weeks. But I was able to watch monkeys and dogs and cows, and I was able to see, you know, them suffer and have the community at large around them in Varanasi just walk by. And
Hmm.
initially, I thought the walking by was sort of an act of ignoring and just looking the other way. And then I learned that that's not really the case, that what I was experiencing was the Hindu culture of recognizing that suffering exists. And so initially I was shocked that nobody was as outraged as I was seeing a suffering animal in the street and they're walking over a dog that has a broken back. But the longer I was there, the more I learned that they aren't necessarily, some people are just, walking away and turning their back, but that what they're, I think the larger issue that was happening that I wasn't aware of because I didn't grow up in a Hindu culture is that they accept that suffering is a part of life. And so
Mm.
if a cow is dying in the street, you know,
All right, pause, dear watcher. Lots of hard images. Just pause for a sec. Notice where you're at. You are not in this. You're not in India. You're not in the Arctic. You are in your car or on your couch. Just notice where you are. Notice that you are okay. Notice your breathing. You can pause it here if you'd like and start it again when you're ready.
It isn't the shock and awe that it would be in my community. Um, and so that, and that forced me to look at it through a Hindu perspective. But because I really wanted to try to help each, sentient being that I came across, I needed to face it and, be
How was
have
it to face
engaged.
it?
Oh,
Yeah.
like compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
So just draining,
Yeah.
draining to be in a culture where they don't believe in euthanasia and to listen to the belief system of why we wouldn't want to put an animal out of its misery because of a belief system about playing God and we can't euthanize, and yet to grow up in a culture where we are encouraged by our veterinarians to make choices that do sometimes feel very convenient and at our leisure, not necessarily if it's the best moment for an animal. So it's confronting.
Yeah.
It's confronting to be in a place where the standard of care is much different
Yeah.
and the access, just the sheer access to running water and
Yeah.
antiseptics and cleansers and a roll of duct tape and vet wrap. Those things, it turned
Yeah.
out in future trips, I would bring an entire suitcase full of vet wrap and I felt like, a hero because that's something that's just not available.
Yeah.
But mhm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So 2013, you became kind of confronted by seeing suffering and
Mhm,
acknowledging that suffering was in the world.
mhm.
And then did that, like, how did that change when you saw stuff about the melting Arctic ice and the polar bear's plight? The pictures of like a polar bear swimming in the ocean with no ice around or whatever.
Yeah, at some point I lost my tolerance or I had this, I feel like a broad bandwidth to handle
Yeah.
looking at the suffering. And it's as though my ability to sit with it somehow extended this sentient being some compassion. And I felt like
Yeah.
like not looking away was an honorable
Yeah.
position. And then it started
Wow.
to shift where I can't look.
Yeah.
I want to look.
So this understanding mentality belief that you're kind of honoring this being by witnessing.
Mhm.
Um, can you tell me more about what that's like, or what that was like, right? Because now you can't do it as easily, and I'm wondering what it was like for you to sit through that in order to honor them and honor their lives and their
I
suffering.
think I think I can remember some specific animals, like
Mm.
all the way back to that first trip to Varanasi, and then even subsequent trips. There are specific animals, a dog and
Remember to pause if you need to. She's going to go into pretty graphic images. And this is the process um, for Amy, for sure. And for a lot of people, there's a real need to share those images and feel some of it. And Amy has the capacity, because we've worked together for a while, she has the capacity to hold that. And not all of us do. And so skip some of this or pause and come back to it a few seconds at a time. But take care of yourself. And as I watch this, I appreciate and I'm honored to be able to be in this process with Amy.
In particular that clearly had, um, oh, now the illness just left me, but distemper.
Mhm.
She clearly had distemper and, there's no recovering. She needed to be euthanized. And the way people were walking over her, I remember standing with her and I asked a shopkeeper for a piece of cloth just to somewhat cover her up as an act of respect. And I think because I could act, I
Mhm.
couldn't necessarily relieve her suffering. But I could stand up for her. I could look at other people who are looking away. And there was something about that action that felt purposeful.
Yeah.
And so then to turn on the television and be so separated from
Yeah.
a situation that not only have I never seen ice, I have never been to that environment. I've never seen a polar bear outside of a zoo. So I'm not sure if it's just sheer helplessness that, I've asked myself, well, I think when I came home from that first trip to India, I watched The Cove, which
Mhm.
was about the whales in Taiji. And I must have gotten so upset. I didn't even completely remember this, but I got an email from the Sea Shepherd organization thanking them for my application to volunteer, which was quite funny because I must have sent that in a very heightened emotional state. I didn't really remember offering
Uh-huh.
my services to go to Taiji, but I had. And I kind of laugh at that because that's fine and well. I could go down to the cove and hold space and help, but I'm not sure how any of that applies with polar bears and ice. It just
Yeah.
feels like massive helplessness and no amount of grand effort or not looking away or any of what, as I'm hearing myself, sounds kind of entitled and privileged to have a luxury to sit and witness.
Yeah.
All of that's just shit when it comes to polar bears having no ice. It just doesn't mean anything and it's all
Yeah.
crap and there's no one I can write to and I can't
Yep.
get on a plane and go somewhere and make a difference at all.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And at the same time, it sounds like, going back to that cold plunge, right? That
Mhm.
sharp, sharp pain before you go numb.
Mhm.
And it sounds like you've started to turn away, look away, turn off, scroll past, whatever, that those images before you hit the numb.
Mhm.
Do you
Yeah.
get to the sharp pain or do you just feel the cold shock and then look away
I think
now?
cold shock. I don't think I get to the
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
Um, what do you do after that? Can you think of a time recently where you were seeing polar bears or whatever and you had to look away?
Yeah. I I I got an article that came up on Apple News and there was an image of a polar bear that was just skin and bones, starving.
Yeah.
It, yeah.
And you looked away.
Absolutely. Mhm.
And do you remember what you did after that?
Probably something really embarrassing and dumb and mind-numbing, like open Pinterest and look at a new way to use a cucumber or something
Yeah. And
really dumb.
so I'm curious, what would have happened? What can you imagine having happened if you had continued to look at that article and continue to look at that image until you went numb? What would you have been good for after that?
Oh, I think I would have been coming up with new and creative ways to try and throw myself into some project and like specific to the animals that I probably should not be focusing on because of the other things in my life that need my attention.
Yeah,
I think I would have disconnected from the animals that are currently in my life that need my attention.
yeah,
All the horses, all the cats, the dog,
yeah.
my husband. I'm pretty confident I would have pulled a sea shepherd sort of action, which is instead of just looking at it and letting it get me to the painful numb part, I'm sure I would have needed to like scurry into some amount of action that I probably couldn't even have seen through
Mhm.
because there are too many other things in my life that need attention and that come well before
Yeah,
whatever new thing I
yeah.
would have come up with.
So it sounds like you called it hopelessness and helplessness, and you've talked about privilege. I might, so this is my language here.
Mhm.
Guilt? Is there guilt, or what kind of emotion would you call that, of not being able to do anything and turning away?
Maybe I don't know if it's guilt or um uh it feels like just living in a culture and that allows me to like have shut those things off,
Mm.
that if I'm going to use disposable everything and inundate my own particular county's trash dump with my crap and satiate my need to shop to buy some more, like all of those actions are so well supported
Mhm.
in where I live and how I grew up that that to me feels, I mean, I don't know if it's about guilt or if it's just having access to not look at it. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any sensations in your body right now as you're trying to work that out?
Yeah, the that like low grade nervousness.
How
Like
does
if you're
that
gonna,
show up?
it shows up with like a little bit of the tingling. If you're about to have a challenging conversation, you're not
Mhm.
sure if you're having the conversation with somebody where you're going to be heard and it's going to,
Yeah.
if you can't move through it, know you'll get to the other side okay. It feels
Yeah.
tentative
Yeah.
and
Is that
tingly and not the great ways.
not in the good ways? Yeah. Is that all over, or is it concentrated in the particular areas of your
My
body?
feet, my feet,
Your
my low back.
feet,
Hmm.
feet and low back. Yeah.
Mm,
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah. Are your feet on the floor right now?
they're crossed.
Yeah. Can you
Yeah.
just notice them? Just notice your feet. And if they're touching the chair, the floor, or whatever, just notice where they're touching each other.
Mm.
Yeah. And the tingling in your low back, does that change at all as you pay attention to it?
Yeah, it dissipates.
Yeah.
When I put my breath there, it softens.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And is there still tingling in your feet?
Mhm. A little.
Yeah. Do they want
Mm.
to do anything?
My toes wanna wiggle. They wanna
Is it
move.
is it okay to wiggle your toes a little?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So just wiggling your toes and noticing if there's a pattern to it or if it's just completely random wiggling.
Seems random.
Yeah. Yeah. And what else do you notice in your body as you're wiggling your toes?
Mm. Mm. Um, Shallow breathing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Just a feeling of a bit guarded.
Yeah. Is that guardedness, is it directed towards anything or anyone? What is it guarding you from?
I think the nature of what we're talking about, it feels like unlike other conversations that we have or in the work we do that is not specific to this,
Mhm.
I can anticipate going into those conversations like really leaning in and breathing and opening and
Mhm.
feeling more optimistic or like I have the tools to
Yeah.
navigate what we're going to address.
Yeah.
S- Circling back to like when we started talking, carries a very helpless feeling to it.
Yeah.
And I'm, where you've taught me to just witness the breathing
Mhm.
and not
Mhm.
like, oh, the breathing's bad because it's shallow.
Mhm.
And I'm recognizing that my breathing is shallow. And I imagine that is the guardedness that comes with
Mhm.
leaning into or not leaning into how hard it is to
Yeah.
look at that one particular element of the climate change and impact of a particular species.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah. So it reminds me that guardedness, that shallow breathing, that like keeping it a little bit further away, right? Just like a little further away. I can't go into this one.
mhm,
Reminds me of turning away from that image or
mhm.
turning off that program. How does that resonate for you?
Well, I don't like that.
What?
I It makes me think of an article that Apple News sent me, and maybe they were throwing me a bone, the algorithms, that there's this group of polar bears, I think, in Manitoba that are adapting, and they've
Mm-hmm.
tracked them, and they're figuring that they're actually becoming great at hunting in the water or however this is happening, which seems like how is that possible? This has happened so quickly, the loss of ice, and yet they're adapting that quickly. And I remember as soon as I started reading the article and I could tell the verbiage is going a good direction, it was such a relief. And I was like, ah,
Yeah.
I can read this article. I don't need to look away
Yeah.
from this one.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Just notice that. Like, and so thinking about this group of polar bears in Manitoba who are adapting faster than evolution, right? They're
Right.
like actively, probably one or even two generations are figuring out how to figure this out,
Yeah.
how to continue to survive in completely unheard of uh, conditions for that species.
Yeah.
And being able to finish a whole article, being able to read it,
Hmm.
like what does that do in your body?
Oh, it creates space.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
creates space. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that. I'm sure you could explain it. What's the chemical reaction that happens in your body after, like, there's the nerves and then they settle and you have that, like, oh, that soft, there's some hormone or chemical that's been released in the body,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. I can't, of course, I can't bring it to my mind at the moment.
But yeah,
But yeah.
you would normally science the shit out of that for me and explain exactly. And that's what's happening right now. I have that, like, oh, that's so euphoric. Go Manitoba polar bears for figuring it
Yeah.
out. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, uh, so they figured it out without you.
They certainly did. They certainly they did. You're right. I didn't do anything except look away and they sorted it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily saying that that's the tactic to take, but the other thing is that we started by you feeling good in like a completely different, your the way that you like to talk is neutral, neutral negative, neutral positive, right? And you like flat out, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm like so far from neutral positive that it's like
Yeah.
completely different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder what you think, like, should you be bad all the time because there's polar bears starving and drowning?
Well, clearly not. Clearly, you've walked me to a logical place of recognizing that my inner
I wasn't
turmoil is not.
actually manipulating you.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, I appreciate how you just walked me right to that because that's incredible that, you know, um, my worry or additional worry or lack thereof would have had zero impact on these Manitoba polar bears.
Mhm.
But what was the question? Like, should I not worry? Were you asking?
Oh,
Because,
should you feel bad all the time because there's polar bears having a hard time?
well, no, no, I shouldn't feel bad all the time, but I recognize that only by being triggered one direction or the other do we maybe take some action on
Really?
something.
Is that, yeah. Have you taken action without getting triggered?
Well, trigger maybe isn't the word, but action comes from being prompted. Something
Mm,
prompts you
yeah,
to
some
decide,
knowledge. Yep.
right?
Yeah.
So the knowledge of some injustice for the animal might move you to go to Taiji or, go back to Varanasi time and time again with a suitcase full of vet wrap, which in the grand scheme of things, who am I really helping? I, but yeah, it matters to me.
It matters to you. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it does. And
Hmm.
just notice that, right? Like, I'm just throwing out word salad here, right? And you're feeling, yeah, it matters. It
Hmm.
matters to know. It matters to know that there's things that are going badly
Hmm.
and that maybe there is something I can do.
Hmm. But the reading that article about the polar bears that are figuring it out, it's like I think there's one publication that comes out of the UK called Positive News. I think it's literally, do you know Positive News, the magazine? Right? One publication on the whole planet. That's
Mhm.
like for those of you who want something good.
Right,
But
right.
that polar bear story feels a bit like, okay, good. Okay, there's a group that are figuring it out, which makes me think about a different National Geographic show with, the doom and gloom of all the other animals. However, the spin on it is when there's the proper balance and the herds are called or the ecosystems are, different species are reintroduced and how the ecosystems then find their balance again, that, okay, I believe nature knows better than us. And I believe
Mhm.
the animals will. Those who can't sort it out fast enough will, of course, be extinct then, and those who can figure it out or step ahead anyway. And great. And my looking away is not impacting them one way or the other. I'm just reinforcing feeling like shit and then probably creating a fair amount of guilt for myself because I can't look at it and I feel like I should be able to look at it. And that's not helping a polar bear one way or the other.
Right around here, I just had this, I've been working with Amy for a while, and this is different. This is a little different than the Amy that I sometimes see. Um, and I wouldn't have been able to really put my finger on what it is. She's certainly more activated, um, but we've certainly gotten activated during sessions. So this is so I got really curious right around here. I'm trying to sort out that, all that you just said. And I'm wondering how you're feeling in your body right now, having said all that.
Well, the tingling is gone.
Mm-hmm.
I feel at ease.
Mm,
I don't have none of the worrying butterfly.
mm-hmm.
The breathing's still pretty shallow.
Mm-hmm. Is it okay to pay attention to the breathing for just a second? Wondering what else is happening. Are there thoughts or any images or anything come up right now?
Hmm.
Hmm.
It's hard to describe. I can hear my really deep wind chimes outside.
Mm-hmm.
There's like this yellow hue happening in the sky, like it's a one of those really inviting type of like the color in the afternoon that's happening, that deep yellow going into
Mm-hmm.
like sunset. So which all feels nice. Like I like
Yeah.
that image and that sound, but I feel a bit insulated, like guarded, a bit
Still. Yeah.
cut off. And I think that kind of run on thing that I just shared with you is probably indicative of that. Like there's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Having worked with you before, this is different, right? This is a little bit different.
Mhm.
And so I'm curious. These topics are so hard and they're so big. And
Mhm.
there isn't, when there isn't just trying to make it all better, right? Like that, there's no way to make it all better, right? And so these sessions are more like just a moment in time.
Mhm.
And so I'm just curious.
Mhm.
This is it feels it has a different quality. It has that guarded
Yeah.
quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that and I feel that and I know what you're referencing because I feel like I'm vacillating from the guarded to that just tornado swirling of ideas and thoughts that came out that lack some clarity. It's as if I'm ping ponging
Yeah.
emotionally and verbally
Yeah.
through all of what I said that might not make a whole lot of sense, but that's because that's how it's
Yeah.
moving around,
Yeah.
in my head and how I'm feeling it. It feels like it lacks any linear quality and structure.
Yeah. It's so big. It's so
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to look at to get any clarity, right? I mean, tell me where I'm wrong there. I know for
Yeah.
me, it's like I can't spend long enough with it to get clarity and like to feel okay, to feel
Right.
good about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we first started working together and you brought up some things for me to look at, and I was like, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to look at that. And you're like,
Yeah.
peek. And I'm like, no, I can't peek. Whereas now, we've like demolished some of those things that
Yeah.
I can fully like run past. This feels like those things, but 10 times bigger, a million times bigger.
Yeah.
I
It
can't,
is.
because how am I going to impact this?
Yeah.
How am I going to look at it? And, you
Yeah.
know, what would you recommend in the context of how we've done normal work to face other issues when something is this lacks like a direct link to
Mm-hmm.
my action anyway,
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, how do you look at it?
I have
And
theories.
I'm sure you
I
do.
don't have I don't have answers. I have
Okay.
theories.
Okay.
This work like this, like exactly what we've done, even though it feels a little awkward, it feels a little bit guarded. It feels not as uh, complete as other times. It's our systems know how to heal, and we usually just suppress that, right? But once our systems remember how to heal, sometimes bringing it up, even in a context like this where there isn't any like nice little bow at the end, oh, I feel so much better, right? It gets into your system and it's just kind of like there. And your system can work on it even if you're not thinking about it. It can just work on it a little bit. We have the luxury that if this comes up and becomes like a bigger thing, we can totally work with that, right? But um I think it's actually together having conversations like this where we can purposefully not go all the way,
Mm,
right? We can purposefully turn away for a minute while we like regain our footing, and stop the tingles for a second. And then
mm,
we can look back. And I one of my theories is that it's too big to do alone.
yeah, sure.
I mean, we got to this place by all working separately together, right? And I think we need to work together to even look at it, never mind address it. These are
Well,
my
but you
theories.
also no, I agree. I think you're right. Definitely onto something. But you also it the topics need to have a moderator that
Mhm.
also like the levity you brought to the seriousness when you said the polar bears are fine without you worrying about it. They look at what they did, and
Mhm.
that amount of just release of seriousness and to be able to
Mhm.
laugh about it and laugh at myself, that's
Mhm.
helpful
Yeah.
to break down the tension that was building in my shoulders and they're
Yeah.
up around my ears, and I could laugh and go, "Oh, you're right." And how arrogant of me to think that my worry is gonna who cares? I mean, I care.
Yeah.
It's important, but is it?
Right. And
Yeah.
that's what I keep coming to.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I can do my things, right? Another of your topics is, cutting down on plastic and,
Right.
doing
Right.
things. I can cut down on my waste. I can compost. I can, you know, and I can do this,
Yeah.
right? And I think we each have something that we can do
Mhm.
if we feel so moved. And if we aren't in a place where we can look at it, we shouldn't be looking at it. Cause
Yeah.
cause applying for a volunteer position in the Cove, right? When you had no idea that you did so because you were in such a state, right?
Yep. Yep.
I'm not saying it's not a great idea to do so, but to do it from that place where there's no you there.
Right. Oh, it was sheer panic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if we can figure out a way to do this without doing it from a place of panic, without doing it from a place of hopelessness
Hmm.
or helplessness, right? I think doing it decreases the helplessness. And if that means, again, my personal theories, right? If that means looking at it a teeny tiny piece at a time
Hmm.
with a moderator, facilitator, somebody who can help you, right? In relationship, can help you. And then doing whatever tiny things you can personally do.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if that helps with the hopelessness and helplessness. I think it might.
I think it does. It's certainly the feeling of, community
Mhm.
surrounding a concept, just
Mhm.
that. And the knowing that, you're not alone worrying about it
Yeah.
does, that's shouldering that together always feels helpful. I think when I'm in my most like in 2023 when the tsunami waves just kept shattering me, I felt inclined to like go to a homeless shelter and do something like really grassroots help some people because
Mhm.
I know myself well enough that when I'm that shattered, to sit with my own pieces on the floor is not as impactful
Mhm.
from a recovery perspective
Mhm.
as like putting my own shit aside and participating and helping. I think which is part of why I got stuck in India and kept going back because
Yeah.
that part of like being able to help and an
Yeah.
acts of service
Yeah.
really do
Yeah. Yeah.
really really help. It's not crap to
Yeah. I'm wondering if you've gotten this far, if you can tell the difference in the way that Amy is talking now compared to her, I think she was calling it a monologue, something like that. Um, that was stream of consciousness with a little bit of desperation. Um, and now when she's talking, there's, again, these are just my words, but there's conviction instead of strident. I think that's probably a word I would use. Um, and it's uh, watching the difference is pretty cool.
you can dive down your own rabbit hole and it turns out that no matter how much you never hear some enlightened Buddhist monk say you're going to worry yourself into enlightenment or you're going
Mm-mm.
to grind yourself into relaxation. Like it never
Right,
happens.
right.
But there has to be some catalyst to
Hmm.
remember that in those very dark hours, and whether or not you have done some act of service and then you can remember. But I remember getting some terrible shit news and like at the beginning of 2023 and then feeling like I need to haul ass to go do something to help some other people because this is a very slippery slope. And if I'm down
Hmm.
the hole and I start pulling the covers over my head, I might not get out of bed for a while, which also
Yeah,
happened.
right.
But, you know,
Yeah. And I love that there was some part of you that knew to do that. I
yeah,
love that.
yeah.
And do you think that that was because of all the trips to India, understanding how that was helpful?
Oh, no, I think it went back further. I
Yeah.
th Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
helping like the single animals here and there. What else? What else?
Oh, no, like, I think there were, like, different life experiences that prompted me to learn that that's a time when, let's say, where I would reach for that which numbs me out. So if I would
Mhm.
eat tons of kettle chips or drink a lot of champagne, or that at some point when I had the luxury to just lean into whatever sensation I was chasing. So if I was at a
Mhm.
time in my life where shit's hitting the fan and I'm going to overdrink or overparty or whatever the thing, fill in the blank is, I learned that it never touched what was actually happening. Like,
Mhm.
thank God I learned that, right? That
Mhm.
because then what it set me up to do then, like, into my 30s, I think, so maybe in my 20s I would touch those lessons. So then when I would get depressed and I could feel myself cycling into this deep depression,
Mhm.
I had already tested, did the champagne help, did the kettle chips help, did the, like, partying with strangers help, did what, fill in the blank, did promiscuity help, and it turned out none of that stuff helped. So somewhere along the line, in an attempt to really save myself, I was able to go, that stuff isn't going to make me feel better. Which, even though there have been other times in my life where I'm like, okay, I know it's not going to make me feel better, but as you would say, it's a resource that I'm going to use right now.
Mhm.
But thank God that knowingness was intact enough over the years that if my depression was amping up so strong, I knew that some of those things that I would traditionally reach for, they were going to make it that much worse.
Mhm.
And I was either going to hit rock bottom I couldn't come out of, which
Mhm.
I've never had, like suicidal ideation or any of those kind of things, but I've had the depths of helplessness that I'm like,
Mhm.
well, if you keep hitting rock bottom and then you find a new rock bottom and then rock bottom has a basement and now you're in that, at some point you choose to pull yourself up out. And so I would just avoid that which I knew was going to send me deeper.
Mhm. Mhm.
So in the case of helping other people, an act of, like, feeling like I'm in a community, or
Mm. Mhm.
right, why, like, the
Yeah.
Buddhists have sangha, and so they can, or indigenous cultures come together. What, there's the African culture where if somebody behaves badly, like, they surround them and they chant to them with love and encouragement to support them, and knowing, like, they're not a bad person, it was a bad action. Like, that's a foreign concept for us. And
Yeah.
so thankfully there's something in me that has been able to identify when to lean into something that might make me have a temporary relief and when it's a terrible idea. And
Yeah.
that's all it's.
Yeah. That that deep wisdom learned
Mhm.
wisdom to reach for others, reach into community.
Mhm.
It's so easy when you get there to sink into I'm all alone.
Mhm.
Everything is awful. I'm all alone
Well,
and I'll
then it
never get out of this.
instantly reinforces this I me centric, like,
Mhm.
it's such a terrible cycle. You're
Mhm.
in it alone because then no matter what anyone says to you, I mean, you were, like, I've shared with you in some of the work where I was told after my precious dog Fling passed, someone said to me, "I know exactly how you feel," and I was outraged. I was
Mhm.
outraged that somebody even claimed to know exactly how
Mhm.
I felt without having any communication with me, without gathering information, without
Mhm.
even saying to me, "How do you feel?" I just
Mhm.
got this random message of, like, "I know exactly how you feel." It was so off-putting. And I knew I was in such a state of I, me, this is as bad. No one knows the pain I'm
Mhm.
in. And yeah, it's one of the hardest struggles ever in my life, biggest
Yeah.
losses. But the problem with getting into that is it reinforces this sense of you can't possibly know. And it creates this separation of all of humanity from my friends that love me and my family members who have always been by my side. All of a sudden, I've ostracized everyone on sheer principle because you can't
Hmm.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a hallmark of freeze, shut down, overwhelm.
Mm,
I am an island unto
mm,
myself and I can't contact others.
mm.
And that's why this little part of you that's like, I gotta go, like volunteer at a homeless shelter or something. I
Yeah.
have to be with others. I have to remind myself that I am not an island. You're literally just working with your nervous system to remind yourself that we are social animals.
Yeah. Hmm.
I love that. How you feeling right now?
I feel, I mean, I maybe not, the needle maybe isn't as like wonderful when I said way beyond the neutral positive,
Mhm.
but still, I'm still significantly ahead of neutral positive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Good,
Hmm.
good.
I find the consideration of all of this really helpful.
Yeah,
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
I'm glad.
Yeah. I think it's a little chuckle that you saying that to me about my worry and impacting Manitoba polar bears is definitely a gem to
Hmm.
take forward in the seriousness and the heaviness of it all. You know, the plastic and the image of the seahorse and the plastic Q-tip and the polar bears standing in unnatural muddy environments with like
Mhm.
no ice in sight. I can There has to be something to remind me of, you know, the other side of how serious that is and have some faith in, you know, the plan, the grand plan of it all. And I think lately I've looked at some of the James Webb telescope pictures.
Mm,
I've found
mhm.
them remarkably uh in what's the word, not encouraging, endearing, but nurturing in a way. There's something that I'm finding that I want to hang them on the walls, which is wild. I've never felt that way. But I can look at those images and go, I'm pretty sure we're not alone. So some of these little things that we can just get in the granular minutia and the worry. And I'm like, there's something about looking at the pillars of creation from NASA stepping back that I go, okay, maybe I can ease up on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I go there too.
Do you?
That's one of my things. Yeah. Not necessarily the James Webb images, but the vastness
Yeah,
and how like we are just like a little dust mote, right?
yeah,
And our problems are of course huge for us,
yeah,
but on the grand scheme of things,
yeah.
and that's not to let them go, right? That's
Mhm.
not to say that I don't care
Right,
about what's happening to the planet and what's happening to humanity
right,
and everybody affected by us, right?
right,
Because I care deeply enough to do stuff about it, right? To
right.
do my own type of stuff about it. But it is so vast.
Mhm. It is.
And
It is.
it's comforting. Like there's some
Yeah,
part of me that's comforted by that.
yeah. I think I heard the statistic that something like if you hold up a drinking straw
Hmm.
and what you can see through the straw, how many solar systems or how many other
Hmm.
galaxies would be in the straw. I remember the day I heard that, I felt such a sense of relief.
Hmm.
Like, okay, then okay, that I mean, I grew up terrified of dying. I was terrified of dying. We had a military helicopter crashed in our yard and everyone was killed. And so it was really confronting and, deeply traumatic. And so I always thought everything was going to kill me. And then when I
Mm.
closed my eyes, there was this vast blackness that felt like a vacuum sucking me in. And I
Mm.
could feel that pull, and so
Mhm.
I'd have to open my eyes, and I'd always have to open my eyes to stop that vacuum pulling. And of course, as I grew up and I had life experiences, that started to soften to it, but it was always a bit there. And then little things, but one of the big ones was that statistic about other galaxies or other solar systems and how many exist just in the size of that straw.
Yeah.
Really was one of my first, like, oh, I can breathe and, like, be okay not knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. Be okay with not knowing. I love that.
Mhm,
Love that.
mhm.
Wow, that was intense. If you were moved or affected by this episode in any way, take a minute. Notice where you are. Again, notice your surroundings. If you have the freedom, don't jump into the next thing. We absorb the goodness of our feelings after the fact, so pause if you can. Don't forget to do the things that every YouTuber tells you to do. I'd love for this series to reach the people it will impact the most. Can't do that if they never find it. So, like or subscribe, tell a friend, take care of yourself.